Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am going to be very brief because, number one, I know everybody wants to go outside and get some drinks, and number two, because I only have a few minutes, so we will be very brief. I'm really excited to be here. This is my fourth DEF CON speaking. I love coming to DEF CON. I've been using the FileMaker platform for almost 20 years at this point, and this is Mecca, right? This is the gathering, and I love coming here, so I'm really excited. I'm glad to have you guys here. There's some obligatory slides here about myself, which is supposed to tell you that that I know what the hell I'm talking about here, right? But really, the thing here is I've been doing development, especially in the FileMaker platform, for a very long time, and I've done a lot of things professionally. Hope that comes across. I think more importantly, in personal, I am probably the happiest dad and husband in the world. I'm an overall geek that likes good coffee, and I love roller coasters. So if you want to find me, I am probably at the nearest coffee shop or riding a roller coaster nearby, which I'll probably do after this. Anyways, to more important matters. This topic is really, I'm really passionate about this topic because it really goes to what I think the strengths of the FileMaker platform is, and mobility in itself. And we already know that mobility really has taken over. Mobile devices really are, there's twice as much in mobile devices today as there are desktop PCs, and there's almost one mobile device for every adult human being on the planet. So we know it's taken over the world. But what some people don't know is that there's been, for as long as we've had mobile devices, there's been a discussion going on, a debate on what is kind of the right approach. We've been debating between developers and systems architects and experts out there on what's the right approach when it comes to developing for mobile devices. Should we create monolithic, all-in-one applications, or should we create discrete, single-purpose, very narrowly focused, very lean mobile applications? And this debate has been going on since there's been mobile devices, for really about 10 years, for the most part, pretty quietly. What happens in the last few years, this concept of app unbundling came into the spotlight. App unbundling meaning functionality from an app being stripped out and converted into its own standalone app. And this has come into the spotlight. A lot of articles have been written about it. But the truth of the matter has been going on for a very long time. And I would say goes back 10 years to when the first real smartphones came to market. And I myself have this experience when I remember having getting my first smartphone. Right? Probably a lot of you have also remember that I used to manage all of my personal information on my desktop. I had a software, a personal information manager, a PIM. Anybody remember those things? I had all my information in one application on my desktop. I had my contacts, I had appointments, to-dos, notes, everything was in this one software there. And then when I got my first smartphone and I turned it on, I was surprised. I've got all these different apps in there, and all this information is completely separate. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not going to work. I was wrong, by the way. But this is my first experience with unbundling, right? All this information goes into these separate things. Fast forward to 2013 and 14, there's to what a lot of people dub the great app unbundling. And you probably remember this, where there was a lot of very famous, very popular apps out there started to strip out a lot of their functionality and create single-purpose apps out there. We probably all remember Facebook taking out their messaging functionality and creating their own messenger app. They went on later to create other single-purpose apps instead of adding functionality to their existing one. We have also Foursquare, very famously, split their app into two. One called Swarm, I believe it was, and another Foursquare. And it was really interesting. In that particular case, they find out, it was backed by data, they found out that over 90% of their users went into the app to do one of two things. Most people didn't do both things at the same time, so it made a lot of sense. We can split into two, and then people can do whatever they want to do. Interesting enough, a couple of years afterwards, it seemed like this app unbundling thing was trying to kind of curtail, it was trying to come back, and a lot of these apps that were famously created were starting to be killed off. And some of the functionality of those were being pulled back into the original app. And we heard a lot of experts say the app unbundling stuff is dead. Single-purpose apps are dead. Long live the multi-purpose. And we heard a lot of those screams, things like that. But that really didn't happen. I mean, we're seeing now still today where a lot of those narrowly focused apps are still there. Facebook still has a lot of those apps, actually has a lot more, even though it's killed off a lot of those and pulled back. So we're still kind of wondering, what's the right approach? What should we do? Should we do, multi-purpose, or should we have very narrowly focused apps? And some of the people ask me, well, what do we care about that? We're really not creating apps for the App Store ecosystem, right? Most of us are creating apps for our own customers, for our own businesses. Well, the thing is that we have a lot in common. What happens in the App Store really a lot of the times trickles down to enterprise and to businesses. And for a lot of reasons, one of them is we have the same users, right? They're not completely different. Those people who are at home with their phones on social media apps come back and they're using your apps from 9 to 5. So we have the same users. So a lot of those things really are the same. So before we go on, we kind of have to level the playing field. What do we mean by single purpose? Well, I think what we should do is really say what it's not. And we have to kind of take the myth that single purpose means single feature. That's not true. See, features and purpose are completely different. A feature is more about, describes what an app does or how it does it and things like that, right? It's about that kind of thing. Purpose, on the other hand, is about what the user wants to achieve, what its goal is, what are we allowing them to do. It's not about how. It's not about which way the user does it. Definitely not what's the right way to doing it. It's more about how we enrich and how we better the user's life. So going by that, then, the best definition I could find, or kind of the best quote, is, a single feature app does one thing. On the other hand, a single purpose app is for one thing. And if we go by this, then we can kind of derive that a single feature app is a single purpose app. But I think more importantly that a single purpose app can have multiple features. It doesn't have to be very Spartan and too lean and only have one thing. It can be very rich. It can have a very great user experience with multiple features, just as long as it's narrowly focused. So what do we do? Do we bundle or do we unbundle? And when it really comes down to it, especially in the custom app environment, we really have two strategies to choose from. On the one hand, we can choose to have one multi-purpose app where we put everything that the user can possibly want to do into one app. Or on the other hand, we create a constellation of apps, each specifically designed to do one thing and one thing only. Now, there are advantages for both of these strategies. Right? On one hand, multi-purpose app has a lot of great advantages. Number one is we can provide a single environment for the user. They don't have to guess where they have to go. They go into this place and they have everything they possibly need. And we can create the user interface and we can control the experience very well. It's really nice and very easy for the user from that point of view. The other thing that it has going for it is that we can control also have a unified experience. And when I say this, I don't mean just for the user per se, but also for us, for the developers. We can take advantage of reusable code. We can create infrastructure. We can use frameworks, things that are going to be shared and used among the different components of the app. Let's think about notification systems and logins and things like that we can reuse inside of them. And there's a lot of great advantages of that. We can, by updating and adding enhancements to these reusable pieces of code, the entire app, all the different components that are using those can also take advantage of those, right? And bug fixes also spread around the entire app. So that really is a great advantage. The other thing is that it's a lot easier for us to take all the data from all the different components of the app and provide that as an aggregate, right? All these different components are capturing data, and it's going to make it a lot easier for us in this type of environment so they can share and take all this information and funnel it up. Because in the end of the day, we're going to want to analyze the data that we're capturing with these apps. So it makes it a lot easier for us to match the schema of the organization to the components and the functionality of the app. Now, what about the other side, right? What if we go a completely different strategy and we create a bunch of different single-purpose apps? Well, it has its own advantages as well. Number one is mobile devices, the home screen of mobile devices have become the portal, the new portal. You probably remember back in the 90s where we had web portals, and we can go in and customize those web portals, and we could put links to our favorite sports team and stocks and weather, and everybody could customize and had their own view. And by viewing that portal, you can very quickly tell how this user interacted with the internet, how they consumed the internet and data in itself. Well, the home screen has become that. Users are customizing their home screen, putting the apps that they most commonly use. And by you looking at the home screen, you can very quickly tell how a user is interacting with the internet, how they're consuming data, what is important to them. So the home screen has become the new portal. So that is a great advantage of having all these apps. So the user can customize it and make it their own. The other thing is by eliminating bloat and just focusing on really what's important, we can eliminate all those unnecessary things. See, when we're starting to put a lot more functionality into an app, we run out of screen real estate. We start tucking things away into hamburger menus and side windows and things like that. And what happens is we start hiding features. Hidden features are lost features. Lost features are unused features. And we do not have time for things that the user is not going to take advantage of. Pure and simple. By focusing on what's important and make it really nice and lean, single purpose, we can resurface all those features and eliminate a lot of bloat. The other thing is this allows us to go very, very quickly and to market. Allows us to deploy these apps a lot quicker. Time and time again, we've seen all the surveys. Organizations out there are requiring a lot faster releases. We've got about, there's a survey I was reading the other day says 50% of US organizations, large organizations, want monthly or even weekly release cycles. Right? That's just, and all of them are, the majority are complaining that IT cannot keep up. So this allows us to help us to get to market and be able to satisfy those needs a lot quicker. The other thing is it minimizes the risk. By doing this fast and low cost, we're minimizing the risk because if it fails, it doesn't matter that much. And this by itself is a great thing, right? It doesn't cost much, you get it really quick, but it has an amazing side effect. By reducing risk, we can also maximize the amount of innovation that we bring into, because if it's not too risky, then we can we feel a little bit more creative. We can do a lot more things, and we can push the boundaries of what we bring to the organization as far as apps. So reducing risk is all good in of itself, but it also allows us to be a lot more creative and and bring a lot more innovation into development. The other thing is that small, lean apps lend themselves a lot better to agile programming and iteration. And if you've ever heard me talk, I am a huge proponent of iteration, starting small and adding to it. Quick, very short release cycles gets you much better results and shortens the gap between what the user wants and what is it you can achieve. So we have these both of these, and they're really wonderful. So we got these both, and we have to choose one of them. But at the end of the day, really, mobile platforms really and mobile users tend to favor single, very easy to use, single purpose, lean, small apps, just the way it is. It makes a lot more sense. That being said, just because you've chosen that doesn't mean you're going to succeed. And I've seen a lot of organizations fail while going through the strategy. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The number one reason I see is that the strategy not be based on the user. Anything you need to do, especially in development, any product development has to be user-centered. If it's not driven by the user, it will fail. even this, right? Even creating single-purpose app, it's okay to have multi-purpose as long as it's user-driven. If it's not beneficial to the user, it will fail. So this is easy to avoid. Just talk to your users. The other thing I hear very often, or I see very often, has to do with saturation of apps. It's real. We see it all the time. There's been studies and studies and surveys. Users want less apps. They're spending a lot of time, but they're doing it in a reduced number of apps. And let's be honest, it can be tedious to going through a lot of apps. So this is true. This is a real thing. But because we're here, this is the FileMaker platform, we actually have tools in the platform to allow us to minimize the risk of failing because of this. For example, if we use the FileMaker iOS App SDK, and you can leverage mobile device management, and you can deploy these apps and make sure you only deliver the apps that your users need, depending on their role, depending on the activities that they have to do. So instead of giving them all 100 apps that you've built, you can give them only the 5, 6, or 7 that they actually need to work. If you're not using the iOS App SDK, you can do a lot of other things. You can customize the launch center. You can configure FileMaker Server to filter the amount of apps that are shown. There's a lot of ways for us to use that. The platform provides us a lot of great tools for it. But just minimizing the amount of apps that your users have to choose from goes a long way. The other thing that happens very often is providing little or no interaction between the different apps. The reality is, even though you have a lot of multiple single-purpose apps, at the end of the day, they all should work for one goal, right? For the organization, and they have to talk to one another. The workflow of one app very often will trigger the beginning of a workflow for another app. So there's got to be some sort of way for those two apps to talk to one another, to hand off the process. Wonderful enough, right? In the platform, we have amazing tools in there to help us do that. We've got, URL schema, and we've got linking between files, and there's a bunch of tools in there that make this a lot easier. And it helps us avoid this from failing in the process. The other really big one I can see very often is producing data silos. Having multiple apps can isolate the data and make it harder for us to aggregate all of the data and funnel it up later on. Now, the good thing is that in our platform, we can link the files and we can share the data between the different apps very easily. We kind of all know this, but we have to start thinking about this because at the end of the day, we need to be able to aggregate the data to get meaningful information out of it. So reducing the possibility of scattered information is very, very important. But we can minimize that with the tools that are built into the platform. So, all that said, we still have those two strategies, right? And we have to think about what is the right approach. Still, when it comes to mobile devices and mobile platform, we should favor single-purpose apps. The more lean, the very, very narrowly focused, single-purpose apps really win at the end of the day. And having multiple of those, working them together, are just really the best approach. That being said, it's not your only strategy. And you don't have to go one way. One way does not negate the other. It's not an either-or thing. You can have very robust multi-purpose apps in your organization alongside a constellation of single-purpose apps that work together. But it has to be, the decision has to be user-driven. It has to be because it makes sense to your user. Otherwise, it is bound to fail. So having all those work together and deliver exactly what the user needs when it needs it. So with that, that's it. I think I was on time. So with that, the session will have some updates. I've updated the slides a lot, so I apologize if you downloaded the slides before that. Please do your evaluations, and we've got a few minutes to answer any questions. Please use the mic because this session is being recorded.
I was wondering, does this just really come down to a user interface issue? So, for example, if a user just likes to interface with apps by going to the home screen, clicking on the thing they want to do, and going back, could you theoretically have only one app that somehow had 5 different home screen icons for doing the different things in there?
Yeah, if in the back end, again, this goes to our platform, which is really great, right? We could technically have just one app, one large app that does it all, and just have multiple interfaces. That works very well. As long again, it's user-driven and it makes it very easy for them to get very quickly to what it is they want to do. Again, this goes to the strength of the platform that we can do that. In other platforms, that's really hard to do or almost impossible to do, but that works perfectly fine. I've seen some organizations where they'll have what they'll do is they have a big app in the background with all the data, and then they'll create small interface files, right, and create those as iOS apps that connect and are live to that back end. That's perfectly fine, because from the point of view of your user, again, this is user-driven. From the point of view of your users, they've got discrete, single-purpose, very narrowly purpose apps, and that works perfectly fine.
Could you alternatively maybe just put a lot of work into maybe the menu set or the splash screen that you have in your app to direct them in there and then make it very easy to navigate to only the module that they want to use? Or is it really ingrained in users now that you got to go back to the home screen?
Well, that depends. And by the way, this is kind of geared to another part. If you do too much of that, right, of just having one big backend where you have everything that's working and just only giving these UIs to the user, you're also kind of turning down some of the benefits of creating these single-purpose, very narrowly focused things, because you're still creating this monolithic thing that mimics your schema and everything, and having all those things in there, and you don't benefit a lot from the iteration of creating something small and reducing the amount of risk. Everything is still in there. Hopefully that makes sense. So there's a fine balance in there, as long, again, as it's user-driven, and it's not because it makes sense as a developer to make it easier for you or because it costs less for the organization. As long as it's user-driven, it should be fine. But there's a fine balance there. Because the platform allows you to do these things, you should still be cautious of that and not rely too much on that, because you still might be veering too heavily on that end. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Oh, all right, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.